Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Audio Advice monthly live stream and giveaway, where today we're joined by, well, some new faces and probably a very familiar face, but it'd be a fun one. So we're here with the Lyngdorf team and Audioholics. So we'll start off with some fun introductions. So Roland, do you want to kick us off?
Hi, Nick. Yes, my name is Roland Hoffman. I'm with Lyngdorf Audio from Denmark, home of some innovative amplifiers and AV processors and some unique speakers. And my role is I'm director of product marketing. So that's twofold. One is to introduce our products, our brand to our distributors, dealers, and customers, pretty much in Europe, but also worldwide. Few weeks ago at Audio Advice Live, for example. And the other part is to collect feedback for our product roadmap and new stuff, new amplifiers coming up.
Awesome. Well, we like to kick these off with a little bit of a fun question. So I know you were thinking about it before the show, so I don't know either one of yours for Gene's, or yours or Gene's for this. But what was your first concert that you remember going to?
I remember going to is actually not a concert I planned to go to. I was quite young, and my parents, their neighbor, he played the trumpet, so they got me to a kind of jazz thing. And then back then I didn't know what this is, because there was like people in front of me having fun with these instruments, but it was very, very real. So even though as a kid I was not into that music, but from a, let's say, music point of view or sound quality point of view, it was super interesting because it was so intense, even though I didn't know any of this kind of music. So that was a kind of Saturday jazz brunch thing.
Well, that's cool. It's a cool introduction to live music. But
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you for joining in. And next up, we got the one and only Mr. Audioholics himself. So Gene, why don't you give us a bit of an introduction for those who don't know you?
Well, I've been on this channel a couple of times, Nick, I think, right?
A handful.
I've been doing this a long time. I've run Audioholics for 25 plus years. So this magnificent torso is over 50 years old now. But I really, I enjoy doing this. I enjoy collaborating with you guys. And to answer your question, the very first concert I went to was Yes during their big generator tour. And I even remember who opened for them. And this is back in high school, like 1988. Guess who opened for him? Bugs Bunny cartoons.
Really?
Because when you're that good of a band, you don't need an opening act. You just need classic cartoons.
Well, that's awesome. That's awesome. Well, thank you for joining in, and thanks for coming one more time. So, yeah, and for me, you guys probably know me by now on here, but I'm Nick. I do home theater design and a little bit of everything. So, got my fingers in a lot of it. So, and my first concert was a 3-person concert, a 3-band concert. It was Journey, Heart, and Cheap Trick. So 80s band. I was huge, and that was like in 6th grade, and I begged to go to the show. We almost couldn't go, and I was heartbroken, but we ended up making it work out. And I was a big Journey fan at the time, weirdly enough, but Heart was super impressive. So it was a very memorable one. But awesome. Well, we have a few things that we're going to do today. So just give you guys kind of a run of show. We're going to be primarily a Q&A driven platform. So this is questions and answers from the audience. So if you guys have any questions about Lyngdorf products or just general questions about 2-channel, theater, anything like that, go ahead and put them in the chat. We actually have a prize for best question. So whoever asks the best question gets a prize, and we have our big giveaway prize. So let's start off by introducing some of the prizes. So Roland, do you want to kick us off with the best question prize?
So is that the TDI?
Oh, that's this one. Yeah, this is the FR1.
This is the FR1. So the FR1 is, as you can see, an on-wall speaker. But what's special about it is it's a full-range on-wall speaker. So it's a 2-way speaker, but with a passive woofer. So this is an on-wall speaker where you don't need any woofers or subwoofers extra, and they come with in different colors, and they come in different covers, fabrics that you can change afterwards. So this is the FR1, and FR stands for full range. Our first full-range on-wall speaker.
Very cool. And then we have our big giveaway prize, which this is for the one that everybody registered for. Give us a bit of an overview of this.
Yeah, so this is an integrated amplifier, a streaming amplifier, and it's a digital amplifier, which is special for Lyngdorf Audio. It's by no means an entry-level amplifier, even though that's where our amplifier range starts, because it's a fully digital, a typical Lyngdorf amplifier with our own digital amplification, and it has RoomPerfect on board. This is our room calibration, speaker calibration, that can really transform any one speaker because it takes the room acoustics into account. So it's more than an amplifier, so to speak, because it can really change that, what everyone has at home. And that's room acoustics.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, yeah, those are some exciting products. And again, yeah, everybody just go ahead and get your questions in. We'll answer them throughout the conversation. But before we start that portion, Roland, why don't you just tell us a little bit about the brand Lyngdorf itself? You guys make a few different products. So just kind of give us a quick overview.
Yeah, so Lyngdorf Audio is based in Denmark, which is actually a country with a lot of audio innovation with speaker drivers, but also amplifiers, especially also here at Lyngdorf Audio. But we come to that later. Our background, our DNA is about digital amplification, and then later also AV processors and some speakers. We are around 45 people here, and we do R&D here. We assemble our products. We do our own cabinets as well. So really grew over the years. And of course, not everyone heard about Lyngdorf Audio, and that is mainly because, you know, most audio companies are much older than we are. So for example, Bang & Olufsen, also from Denmark, they are over 100 years old, or Denon, 110 years, Maran, 70 years. And our founder, Peter Lyngdorf, founded Lyngdorf Audio in 2005. So we are a young and fresh 20 years old. So everyone's forgiven if that's not the first brand that comes into mind in audio. But maybe some people heard us because of two things. One is that it was actually not one of the big audio names who created the world's first digital amplifier. That was the team around Peter Lyngdorf, and that was the Millennium amplifier. And that was, the first audio amplifier, digital audio amplifier in the world. That's the one. I always think it looks like it comes out in 5 years because it looks so modern. But that was actually just before Lyngdorf Audio started. And that's one thing, because that is really a milestone in audio in general. That is our design, and the amplification technology inside is still what we use today, for example, in the TDA 1120. And the other thing that might be known is we have a collaboration with Steinway & Sons, the world's finest piano manufacturer in New York, and we do loudspeakers and complete audio systems for them, together with them. And that's a very unforgettable experience. It's very unique, very different kind of speakers. Not only the way how they are lacquered and made, but also sound-wise, it's pretty unique. There's some open dipole speakers. We remove the cabinet and so on. But actually, the technology inside in the amplifiers, that is what we use in Lyngdorf Audio. So the speakers are unique, the Steinway speakers are unique, but the amplifier technology and of course the RoomPerfect, the calibration that is in the 1120 and all our amplifiers, that's the same in the Steinway systems. So there's no better and entry level room calibration. We have the same for both sides.
Well, very cool. Yeah, that's, room correction is something that, you know, our team really dives into. I think that it's changed up our entire sphere, the whole audio world, and you know, some people embrace it, some don't. And so you guys have your own room correction.
That's right.
That is yours, right?
It's our own, and interestingly, it started in 2-channel audio in 2006. So I mean, Gene is really an expert on all these calibrations. But most calibrations, I would say, they come from the home cinema side or from the studio side, and it's all about neutralizing the sound and linearizing the sound. And our approach is a bit different. And it started with 2-channel audio, and then later we introduced it in our AV processors for surround and immersive audio.
That's kind of the way to do it. I mean, if you can't get 2-channel right, then you have no hope of getting multi-channel right. And the problem when you just go for multi-channel is you got multiple sources playing at once. it's very hard to perceive the differences because your brain gets overwhelmed, right? So you got to start with a base. I always say this, anytime you set up a home theater or any system, make sure your 2 channels right before you go and start adding more speakers. Same thing with room correction.
Yeah,
Exactly.
because some room correction could be done not properly, I would say. So if you listen to it on 2-channel systems, it makes the whole front stage sound squashed. And
Yeah.
so if you have a very wide, very immersive sound stage up front for music, it's going to sound great for movies as well. So that's something that
Absolutely.
we definitely look at. So
Yeah.
awesome. We got some questions rolling in, so I'm going to quit
Already?
asking my questions and jump over to theirs. So,
Yeah.
well, while we're on the topic, so how does RoomPerfect compare to Dirac? So I'll put this as Dirac. I like to change up people's questions. Sorry, Brandon. But how does it compare to others just in the entire space? Because there are a lot of different room correction softwares.
Yeah. So in short, we do some things different. We actually started, or Lyngdorf Audio and the team around Peter Lyngdorf started with room calibration years before RoomPerfect, so way before 2006, actually already in the mid 90s, can you believe, where it was quite very unusual to do any kind of room calibration. And we didn't really have the chipset. It was a big unit, and it had analog inputs and analog outputs. Anyway, the first 2 generations, we called it RCS, room correction system. That was doing, so in 93 and then later in 2001, that was doing what many calibrations still do today, and that is take a microphone, put it at the listening spot, so where your head is, measure the frequency response, and then there's a target curve which pulls everything straight and linearizes everything based on that one spot. Years ago, when we also had this RCS, we followed that same approach, but the feedback from actual listeners, remember that's 2-channel audio, it's not a cinema where you have to calibrate these big front speakers and the medium-sized center speaker and the tiny surrounds which are further back, that you have to calibrate. But in 2-channel audio for music, it was a very uncommon thing. And for music listening, the feedback from these one mic, one take, sweep linearization approach, the feedback was not so great. I mean, everyone heard that, let's say, a boomy bass or something has been removed, but overall, people thought that it sounds very linearized or flat, or they say the musicality is gone, or the whole bass is gone suddenly, it sounds very lean. And that was the starting point for Peter Lyngdorf and his team around 2005, 2006 to say, wait a second, I think we have to really rethink room acoustics and calibrating the speakers to the room. So in short, we kicked out many things. One was measuring only one spot. So we measure at several spots across the room. It doesn't take too much longer. It's of course more than one spot in measurement, but we measure at several other spots across the room because we want to measure not only the frequency response at your head, we want to measure the sound energy, the so-called speaker's power response in the room, across the room, because sound in a room is 3D and it's also over time. If you compare that with a short sweep at one spot, that doesn't tell you everything that you actually hear when listening to music or watching a movie. That's much more complex. It's 3D and there's much more happening. So one thing is we don't measure at one spot, we measure across the room. And the second thing we kicked out was this linear target curve, which is forced onto every speaker. It basically ignores what the speaker can do and can do well. So if you have the very same target curve for each and every speaker, that already, you should already question that, because speakers sound different. You cannot force the same target curve onto every speaker. Otherwise, you erase the speaker sound, the speaker characteristics. We have more like a corridor, and the rest of the so-called target curve is actually develops during the measurement, because it takes the speaker into account. It doesn't try to linearize the speaker. And one last thing, sorry, that's a short question, a long answer, but we have so many things that we do different. And one thing that Peter Lyngdorf and also our CTO, CEO, Thomas Birkelund here was very important, what we really wanted is that it's technically more advanced, but it's easier to use. So no one has to come around and with a program and open the laptop and take 2 hours to do all these things and work with a target curve for an hour. We really wanted a system that anyone can use nowadays, even with a smartphone. Back then, just easy with the product. So it's easier to use, but technically we think it's more advanced than many other systems.
So a question for you, most room correction systems have a real hard time integrating the subwoofer with the main speakers, especially time aligning. What do you guys do that's different? Because I've tripped up most room correction systems and I have to go and do it myself.
It's not easy to accurately measure that, but it's super important at the same time.
Oh yeah.
So we still rely in the home cinema with woofers. We still rely on the distance of the speaker, and then we can put in something else, and that is the latency, the delay of the amplifier. Most amplifier manufacturers or subwoofer manufacturers don't have that number on, but it's there. They have it, so that you can also put in. So it's a mix of the distance and that latency. But of course, we also work on getting that right by an acoustic measurement, but it's not easy. The systems we tried so far, you measure it 3 times and you get 3 different results. That tells you it's not so accurate. It's, as you would know, it's not easy to measure with these long wavelengths in a room to have an accurate measurement.
And it's not just the latency of the amplifier for the sub, it's the high pass filter that they put on them that can cause extra problems.
Yeah, we have it a little bit easier in our system. So if we have a complete Lyngdorf system, we usually work with passive woofers driven by our own amplifiers. So all the EQ, the DSP, it's in the digital domain in the processor, and not in the subwoofers or in the woofers. But again, it's not Lyngdorf processors are not only for Lyngdorf speakers. That's not what I'm saying, but if it's a complete Lyngdorf system, then it's a bit easier to get the phase right and not only the distance. But back to TDI, so that is RoomPerfect is for multi-channel, but RoomPerfect is also in 2-channel stereo.
So a question, are all of your measurements weighted equally? Because that's one of my complaints with a lot of other softwares is that you can't, besides your primary listening position, you can't really weight other seats. So you may have a seat that's right next to a speaker and that's weighted just as much as the one that's a foot from the primary.
No, that's the good thing. We measure at the listening spot, and then we do this room measurements. And then you can also take a second or third listening spot, but they are not averaged. They are just different listening positions that you can also rename. Like one is your favorite armchair, and one is the focus seat or favorite seat or whatever. And the rest is the other measurements is the combined room measurement, but they are not averaged with the listening position. That's very important, because if you average that, then if you think that further, if you do more and more and more measurements and you average that, and then you end up with almost no calibration in the end, because you always average everything out. So that could not be the right direction either. So we don't really do that.
Awesome. Well, we'll jump on to some other questions here. So let's see. Can you explain true digital amplifier in more detail? I want to understand how the analog conversion, or I want to understand the analog conversion at the speaker.
Yeah, that's a very common one, because when we talk about now, it's not a class A, it's not a class AB, it's strictly not even a class D, even though in the output stage it is. You say it's a digital amplifier, and then you even say it's a TDAI, a true digital amplifier. What do you mean by that? Because the signal has to be turned into analog eventually, because that's the only thing that speaker understands, and that's what our ears understand. But basically every amplifier does the same thing, no matter if it's a class A or class AB or even a class D, despite the letter D, but I come to that, or class G and H, they all take a low level, rather weak analog signal and use a transistor and with voltage and current, and make that signal stronger to drive a speaker. That's what every amplifier does. But if you notice, I said it takes an analog signal. So even the class D amplifiers do. They take an analog signal. to do this switching amplification. So the D doesn't stand for digital. It's just a timeline. So all these letters is a timeline, and G and H came later than D. And unfortunately, at the time when everyone was talking about compact disc and digital, that was also where Class D amplifiers became more popular. So almost everyone thought, oh, the D, so that's a digital amplifier. No, it's an analog amplifier. It's just switching amplifier. So that's the Class D amplifier. And they all take an analog input. But if you really think about how people listen to music nowadays, that's 99% digital, except vinyl or tape. I think that's also coming back now, so reel to reel. But let's move that aside for a moment.
Nick has 8-track.
Most is digital, no matter when you talk about low res, like web radio or Bluetooth or whatever, up to high res audio and studio master file 24-bit downloads or Tidal, Cobus, Spotify. It's digital. So what Peter Lyngdorf and his team thought already amazingly before 2005 is, wait a second, everything will be digital eventually. That's the only way to store it without loss, to move it from one place to the other without losses, and so on. So let's make an amplifier that understands digital audio, digital signal, and amplifies that. And that's a technology that we developed. In the beginning, it was called Equibit. And that really takes, technically, it's called PCM to PWM conversion. So it takes the digital audio signal and amplifies it with a voltage, and then there's a filter in the end, but there's no DA converter in the input stage. It doesn't convert into analog in the input stage. It keeps it all the way through the amplifier, right until the speaker output stage, the speaker outputs, and that's where the analog is turned into not converted, but filtered into an analog signal. And that, of course, is much more lossless, because everything that hi-fi enthusiasts and audiophiles and music lovers don't want, a little bit of noise and hiss and crosstalk and left-right imbalance and so on, that most of that happens in the analog domain. Of course, digital is, you have to make the right things right. Also, digital is not faultless, but most things that why analog amplifiers sound different is because of these things in the analog domain, a little bit of distortion and all of this. So rather than to convert in the input stage, we convert or turn the signal into analog in the output stage and have an amplifier which is much more true to the actual system, and it's pretty much lossless all the way through. So that is the digital amplifier part, and that is the true digital amplifier part. I have to add, of course, we have analog inputs in our amplifiers, but that is converted into digital and 24-bit right at the input.
So quick question for you, because there's two types of Class D, and I haven't checked out any of yours yet, so I don't know how they measure. You have digitally controlled or analog controlled. You're talking about digitally controlled. So there's less error correction in those kind of systems, and inherently in the past, when people have tried to do that, you wind up with an amplifier that either has higher distortion or higher output impedance than a Class D with an analog input and feedback correction and all that.
Yeah.
So how does your amp compare to that? Because that's a challenge to do a true digital amp to get good low output impedance and low distortion.
It is, and we don't have a feedback, so it's without feedback loop, because as soon as you do the feedback loop, remember you have something analog and then you want to feed it back into a digital circuit, so you have to have a converter again, and that will always be too late in simple terms. So it's a you could say a forward correction, but it's without a feedback loop. For example, the one I can think of is the NAD M2. That was one of the very few. It came much later, but that's one of
the THX amp does that too, I think, right?
The THX amp.
Yeah, they have their own feed forward correction amplifier.
Yeah, okay. So that would be another case. So
yeah.
The M2 had this loop. So it was digital. I think it was CTEX technology called CTEX or something. And that was, it was digital all the way through, but then it had this feedback loop with a converter. But yeah, that's it's not easy to do that, and that's why not so many do it. And it takes a lot. It actually also takes a lot from the power supply to get this right. So, but yeah, the question, of course, it has to be analog at one point. So true digital only counts until the speaker output, and there, of course, if you measure it or what the speaker sees is, of course, an analog like music signal, audio signal.
Awesome. Yeah, well, that's the class of technology. I think that digital, well, Class D as a whole has been kind of frowned upon by some purists for exactly what you were saying. It's the whole idea of analog. They're saying, oh, it's a digital amplifier, but you, like Gene was saying, you get a lot lower distortion in many of the Class D amplifiers. Do you guys still find that true, or have you explored other amp options?
Yeah, I think this bad reputation comes also partly from the fact that Class D was mainly in the first few years. It was made to save power, to be more power efficient, not necessarily to sound better than the Class A, the best Class A, Class AB amplifiers. For the first years, they were better sounding. I mean, the Class AB, because they were so mature and they were so good. So the first Class D amplifiers, they didn't sound really good. They were just more power efficient, running cool. So you could fit 5 or 7 or 9 amplifier channels into big AVR. Perfect. But sound-wise, it took many, many years. I mean, we did it different from the beginning. So we had always this true digital amplifier anyway. But yeah, it took some time. So for us, using a digital amplifier was not to be more power efficient. That's more like a side effect. Peter Lyngdorf and his team did it because he wanted to create a better amplifier. That's a different approach than just saying, hey, let's save some energy and let's not heat up the amplifier and make it more efficient. So I think I sometimes compare it to the first flat screens like LCD when they came up. Yeah, they were super flat, but the colors and the resolution and the contrast was terrible. Sorry, it was not better than the Pioneer Kuro that I had. So that was an expensive one, but that was so much better when that came out than the first LED or LCD was called. So because it was not good enough in the beginning, and I see this something similar. I don't know about Eugene, but I only see in recent years, maybe only 5 years or so, that Class D amplifiers really, for some people, like they sit in front of it and say, oh, I didn't hear that it's a Class D amplifier, and almost don't believe it. We had the same at Audio Advice or at Exponer or elsewhere, that before we talk about this amplifier technology, we let the people listen. And no one says, oh, it sounds like a digital amp. Is it a digital amp? It really, most people are surprised afterwards, but maybe because, it's not the typical.
I mean, I was around during the early stages of Class D coming on the market. It was mostly for subwoofer stuff. And then when it went full range, there were problems because most Class D amps, they couldn't drive full power. When you try to drive them on a bench, they would go into current protection. They couldn't drive low impedance loads at high frequencies because of the output filter. And they were load variant. So whether you had an 8-ohm speaker or a 4-ohm speaker, you get a different frequency response. So the amp didn't sound consistent for each speaker that you would drive. That's not the case anymore, Nick. I mean, I've measured that Purify amp, and I had to change my whole test rig to measure it accurately because the distortion was as low as my test gear. Never get that from a linear AB amp. And I'm not dissing linear ABs, but most of the amps in my systems now are Class D. Good ones.
The Purify team really made a big step, and that's only happened recently, like 2 years ago. Well, no, 3 years ago.
Yeah, that's what I try to tell people, that it sounds super salesy whenever I say it, but it's not that it sounds good for a Class D amp. Like, it sounds good and it's a Class D amp. So it's that distinguishment. It really doesn't mean anything anymore.
You will still find some wonderful sounding, even tube amps or Class A amp. That's not the point. But definitely they get far better recent years, and I would say some get better than the even good Class A B amps nowadays. They do.
You're not setting up 32 channel systems with Class A amps, Nick.
Well, you can. I just don't think there'll be a room left after that. It'll be burnt down and hot, and your power bill will be astronomical. But awesome. Well, let's go over. So we've talked a little bit about room correction and the amps. Let's go over into speakers. So you guys do something. I'm going to preface this question before I read it. So you guys do something a little bit different than a lot of other companies. You make a lot of on-wall speakers that are specifically designed for on-wall as a kind of a combination between form and function. I'm not going to put words in your mouth, but I'll preface the question with that. So everybody, we'll show you some pictures as he's talking. But what modifications are needed for a wall-mounted speaker versus a bookshelf speaker? So we'll go from the design perspective.
Modification from our side, I think.
Yes, yeah. So essentially, the actual design process.
Yeah, so it's true. We have a lot of wall mount speakers, and amazingly, that what no one did before, as far as I know, is a full range floor stand speaker that's meant to be placed against the wall. That's the FR2 that you see here. So I think you see a pattern FR again for full range, and that's the second model. So the FR2, and that's a speaker that's actually a floor stand, or you can also mount it on the wall, as you can see here. But it's size-wise, it's a floor stand speaker, and that's pretty unique. And the story is, we also started that with some Steinway speakers before, and the idea was first that we had some customers who really didn't want to place the speakers so far in the room. Remember, like, Steinway's customers, they are usually not hi-fi people or audiophiles. It's the how the room looks like and the styling. That is the most important thing. They didn't want speakers so far into the room as an hi-fi enthusiast or audiophile would place it. There's some advice out there where you say the further away from the wall, the better. But not everyone can do that or wants to do that. So that's how it started. And then when we sat together with our acoustic engineers and loudspeaker engineers, they said, actually, it can be better if you place speakers against the wall, if you design the speaker for that sort of placement. And the reason is that if you place a speaker in the room, in the low frequencies, pretty much a speaker radiates sound all around the speaker. It's not sound is from a speaker. It's not like a laser beam that it emits from the speaker and then it hits your ear. It's not that one line. It, especially in low frequency, it fills the room, so it spreads around the speaker. So what happens is, when you move the speaker into the room, a big portion of the low frequency sound wave, travels to the back of the room behind the speaker, and then it's reflected from the wall because it cannot go anywhere. So it will come back, but it comes back delayed. So if you measure it, and actually you can hear it, you get a rather uneven bass because there's some phase things going on. Some frequencies add up, some frequencies cancel out each other. And the more you move it away, actually, in some areas, the worse it gets. Because that's what happens, is the speaker boundary.
Speaker boundary interference. Yeah. I deal with that all the time.
Exactly. So, and not many people know about it, and they don't measure it, but you can hear it. And that's why some people most people spend ages, evening after evening, to move speakers around to hear where does it sound best. Some things improve, some things don't improve. It's because of that. It's in one way it's true, the further away the better, but in other ways it's not. Because you get these phase issues and a very uneven bass. There is a spot in the room, two, where that doesn't happen. And that is if you move the speaker as close as possible to the wall behind the speaker, because then when you make a very shallow speaker at the same time, then the reflection that comes back from the wall and from the actual cone movement, the actual sound wave, acoustically, it's almost one. Especially in this long wavelength. So actually the impulse response, the timing, the punch is better there. It's just too loud because the wall also exaggerates some frequencies. So you don't want that. But that is something that you can kind of design into the speaker acoustically. If you make a speaker that works together with the wall behind it in a good way, you get both. You get a fairly even frequency response, and you get much better punch and timing. It's even more efficient in that way, not electrically, but sound-wise with how it couples to the room. So it's not only a styling thing that because we are in Denmark and we don't like speakers in the room. No, it actually has a real acoustic advantage if you design the speaker that way. So the answer to this question is yes, to have to make the speaker for that in the low frequencies, and you have to make it really shallow so that the woofer moves as close as possible to the wall to have that positive effect.
Interesting. So I'm going to ask kind of a funky question. So is it actually coupling to the wall? Like, is it resonating with the wall?
No.
Okay.
It doesn't need the wall material as such. It's only like a sound barrier, if that's the right word, or boundary.
Boundary.
For the bass waves. They reflect back from the wall anyway. It's just more now it's in time. So don't worry, they don't really let the wall resonate more. That's not the point. So
do you guys do flush mount versions of your speakers? Because that would be the ultimate in terms of.
Absolutely, that's the ultimate. That's not everyone can do that, but of course we do flush mount. We do also flush mount woofers even, and things like that. But these speakers, for example, the FR2 that we also demoed at Audioholics Live, that's a freestanding speaker, but that's the closest you get to in wall. If you cannot do in wall, that's the right speaker for you. But surprisingly, no one really does it as far as I know. I mean, there are some British speakers that are made for rather small rooms, and they benefit from placing it closer to the wall. But still, I would say most speakers are measured and made for anechoic rooms. That's where they measure best. So if they don't have a room, and the problem is that everyone lives in a room, so no one lives in an anechoic chamber. So all these perfect linear frequency response that many speakers have is not worth much when it comes to the low frequencies in an actual room if you cannot, have this distance from the wall.
And you guys do all of your in-wall speakers or flush mount speakers as are they closed back, or do you guys do them as an open back speaker?
No, they are closed. So we have, for example, the FR1 that we shown in the very beginning that has a passive woofer instead of a bass reflex. So yes, it's a closed cabinet, but it has a passive woofer. The speaker here, the FR2, that has actually a downfiring bass reflex port. It's tuned very low, so it's two woofers connected to the amplifier, but it has a downfiring port. But the on-wall speakers, meaning the wall mount speakers, the compact ones, are all closed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Gene, in your theater, you use all on-wall speakers. You don't, beside your in-ceilings, nothing's flush mounted, right?
In my primary theater, no, I actually have big hunking towers, and I deal with speaker boundary interference. So the solution is to add more subs, either put them behind the speakers, add more horsepower. But in my family room system, I do have box speakers, but I've got in-wall flush mount subs. And that's the ultimate, because now you get the image properties of having speakers out in the room, and then you deal with the speaker boundary interference with the subs in the walls.
Yeah. Then, audience, some of this is very technical, and that's but it's the correct answer, and it's really interesting. How the room is one of the most important aspects of sound. More important than equipment many times. So, and you guys, we were kind of talking before this, you make something that you call it, I think, room friendly. Is that the term that you were using for your speakers, or is that just for across the amplifier and entire lineup?
Yeah, well, it's both. We have, of course, we started first with having, as I said, already in 2006, so right after Lyngdorf Audio started, we have this RoomPerfect calibration to make, to address these things, what happened in everyone's room, really everyone's room, even ideal listening rooms still have these things. And then sometime later, that's more like 2014, we also added more speakers that take the room acoustics more into account. So that's our approach in general. So to make them more room friendly in two ways. First of all, how they look, Can be a Danish or Scandinavian thing. And secondly, to address room acoustics in the speaker and the acoustic speaker design. So people you can actually place the speaker against the wall, and you don't have to teach them what to do and what not to do by placing the speakers. If they still want to do that, there are plenty of speakers around to spend all evening to find the best spot, and eventually you get there. But as I said, not everyone can place the speaker like that or wants to place the speaker like that.
Awesome. So let's see, I've got another one that's related to room correction. So what type of mic do you guys use for RoomPerfect?
As if I waited for the question. I didn't know.
Yeah.
No, we use our own microphone. It has a proper alu tube, and we use a proper stand. I mean, there are some with some AVRs. There's these little plastic discs that you're supposed to place on your seat, which first of all doesn't measure exactly like where your ears are, and they're not really accurate. So we have our own microphone, a really good capsule that actually measures also around it. So you don't really, it's not so critical where you point it and this one. So that's a microphone that we not developed, but we use a really good high quality microphone with the capsule, also because we measure from 20 to 20K. So it's important, and that's really how a good measurement starts, with a good microphone. I mean, other calibrations also have a good microphone, so it's not that we have the one and only microphone that works. It's just a good microphone, high quality microphone with a good capsule.
Gotcha. Yeah. So you guys don't allow for any third party with like calibration files or anything like that?
It would work, but of course the processor is a bit calibrated together with this microphone, so that should be used.
Awesome. Okay. So let's see.
And it's included, maybe that's also a part of the question, it's included in the Lyngdorf product. So if you have a TDI, even the 1120, where our lineup starts, and of course in the AV processors, the mic and a proper stand, a tripod stand is included, and the cable is included.
Got it. Well, Gene, I'm going to come to you here in just a second, because you're about to, you got to dip out a little bit early today, I think.
Yeah, I got about 3 minutes.
All right. Are there any questions that you want answered before you leave?
I don't think so. I think we got to get some Lyngdorf product in hands and test it out.
Yeah.
And check out your room correction. I'm curious about it. Also, I want to measure your amplifier too. So I think that's like the next step.
Yeah. You're the expert in all these room calibrations, so I'm really curious what you think about RoomPerfect, because it's a different approach, and I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, I'm excited to check it out. Thanks.
Cool.
Awesome. Well, Gene, I know you have to run, so we'll let you dip here. Everybody in the chat, thank Gene.
All right, guys.
Appreciate you, Ed.
Nice
Thanks
having you.
for taking the time.
Thanks. See you guys.
See you.
So we had some other interesting questions in here about speaker design that I wanted to jump on. So what was the design reason for a two-way full range speaker instead of a three-way?
Oh, it's not really a right or wrong thing to have a two-way or a three-way. We think that if you design the two-way speaker good, how the tweeter blends with a mid woofer, then you should leave it at that. If you add a third mid-range driver, even if you take a really, really good one, you have, first of all, two more crossover points and frequencies, and all these three drive units have to work together. But having said that, we have speakers, for example, with Steinway, which have a mid-range driver as well. It also depends on the SPL, so on how loud the speaker has to play. So if you sit very far from the speaker and have a very, very big room to fill, you probably at one point need individual drive units for frequency, for their own frequency, but it's not really a wrong or right thing. Mm-hmm. So, for example, the Purify speaker that's this one here. So that's our Q speaker, which takes the Purify mid-range woofer. That's so good up to the upper mid-range that all it needs is a good tweeter. So it's really good. That's so unique about this purifier driver, that it's so good in, shifting the air in the low frequencies and still being super neutral in the mid range, which is a very rare combination. Normally a driver can do one or the other very well, and the purifier does both audibly, and if you also measure it, it really measures like a dream. So it only needs a tweeter, and it really, it depends on the room size as well as I said.
Yes, we've had a few different questions with room size. We're going to come back to that. There was a quick one that I just wanted to run through with you. So they're interested in knowing what kind of DAC/chipsets are used. And let's go with, I'm trying to think which, let's do the TDAI. Let's go with the 1120.
Yeah, so the question is what kind of, the DAC chipset is only used for the analog pre-out. So we don't use, as I mentioned earlier, we don't use a DAC in the front stage, preamp stage of the amplifier. That's what almost every other amplifier uses. They use a DAC in the input stage, because the rest of the amplifier is in the analog domain. It's an analog amplifier. Even Class D amplifiers are analog. So they all need a DAC chip in the front end, convert into analog very early on. And then you have to think about, which one does sound better, the Cirrus Logic or the analog devices or this and that. So you basically sound tune in the front stage. We don't usually use a DAC chipset in the front stage. We have a digital amplifier, and it's only converted into analog right before the speaker outputs. We do have a DAC for, let's say, the headphone output. There we use very often one from Texas Instruments, and also we use some analog devices. It depends a bit on the model, but we only use this DAC chipset for a headphone output or for the analog pre-out. For example, if you have your own power amplifier, you can use our TDI amplifier as a preamp, so you can disable the output stage. You can do that with all three TDI amplifiers, and then of course we use a DA converter chipset for the output stage. And I have to add, for the AV processor, of course, our MP40 and our MP60, there we have 16 discrete output channels, and they all have their own DA converter chipset, because that is an AV processor feeding all kind of amplifiers, power amplifiers, our own MXA or other amplifiers, and they all take an analog input anyway. So that's where we have, maybe that's also what Steve had in mind. So not necessarily our TDI amplifiers, they work differently, but our AV processors, they have really good DA converters and really capable output stages in the pre-out.
Awesome. Well, there was something that we were kind of discussing yesterday that I thought was interesting. So you guys do volume control a little bit differently than others, which is a small detail that not a lot of people talk about. Just the idea of changing the volume. So tell me a little bit about what you guys do that just separates you from everybody else.
Yes, so that's also, some manufacturers talk about the volume control and what kind of sliding resistor they use, or ladder resistor, sliding pots, and so on. That's the other thing, that even when Lyngdorf started with this iconic Millennium amplifier, it was not only the first digital amplifier, it also has a very unique volume regulation, which we still use in our TDI 3400 and the latest 2210 amplifier. That is, we don't attenuate the incoming signal. So most amplifiers remember when I said how amplifiers work, and that most amplifiers work the same way? That also goes for the volume regulation, volume attenuation. Most amplifiers take this rather low-level, weak analog signal coming in and attenuate it further through a volume pot, sliding resistor, or resistor ladder. Meaning that where most people listen to music at, say, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock on the volume wheel, that's where you have even more resistance in the signal path. So you make that signal even weaker, which is a little bit absurd if you really think about it, and then amplify it later in the output stage. So that's not lossless at all. So you add noise, you add hiss, left and right channels are not always the same because it's basically two sliding resistors and so on. So this is really like an amplifier from the 50s or 60s or 70s, if you still talk about these analog sliding resistor volume attenuation. The second thing to do is, that's what some modern amplifiers do, is they do digital attenuation. So they take the digital signal, upsample it, so you have enough data, and then you can actually do digital attenuation, which is what every computer is doing. Every laptop, every computer, every portable player, they do digital attenuation, which has the advantage of that it's still in the digital domain, so you don't have all these losses, this noise and the hiss, but it's not completely lossless because you reduce, the data. So that's the two things we don't do in our amplifiers, in the TDI 2310 and 3400. We do something very different, which is lossless, and that is we take the digital signal, as I say, we amplify it, and when you turn, I have one here, if you turn the volume wheel in one of our amplifiers, there's actually nothing behind it. The music signal doesn't go through this volume wheel. This volume wheel only tells the output stage, so the power amplifier, how much voltage to apply. So it's a gain adjustable power amplifier. So this is absolutely lossless. It's not attenuating the incoming signal. It is basically making the power output stage more or less powerful, applying more or less voltage. So making the signal louder or less loud. And that's a very, very unique thing together with this digital amplifier technology. And that makes our amplifiers pretty unique.
Awesome. Well, that's really interesting. Yeah, that's one aspect a lot of people don't pay attention to is the volume adjustment. It's often overlooked, but it makes a difference.
How would you know? But most people are very shocked if I tell them what's really happening, and you can basically, if even some expensive class A, B amplifiers, if you look at the volume pot inside, it's pretty much like 30 years ago. It's a sliding resistor, and that's, sorry to say, it's not good for the sound quality. It's not lossless, it's not noiseless, it has wear over time, and left and right is never perfectly the same. So it's
very cool. So I'm gonna give you one a little bit easier. I've been giving you a lot of technical questions, so let's go a little bit easier on this. What would you say is the Lyngdorf's house sound, if you would say you have one, and what would you and what would attribute it from a tech or ideology standpoint? Sorry, guys, long day.
We don't really have a house sound, I would say, because that implies that we tune the amplifier or the speaker once it's ready to a certain house sound by using that magic resistor or that magic cap or whatever. And we don't do that. We really want to have an amplifier that is very neutral and very transparent. Now, I know that every audio manufacturer says that we are true to the artist, true to the recording, and so on. I just think that we are closer to that because, this whole chain of keeping things in the digital domain, having this lossless volume control, and also then taking care of the room acoustics, I think we really come closer that the recording quality determines the sound performance and not the sound of the amplifier or the sound of the power amplifier or the preamp stage or some sound tuning. And it's a little bit different with speakers, because speakers, there you have much more variety, and no speakers sound the same, no two speakers sound the same. So there, of course, we want to be neutral, but that doesn't mean that the FR2 sounds exactly like the Q, sounds exactly like a Steinway speaker. But still, we want to stay true to the original sound, like many others, but I think we come closer to it. So sorry for that little bit disappointing answer, that what's the house sound? Oh, it's a fuller sound or it's a leaner sound. We don't want either. and that, but if you do it right, then a neutral amplifier sounds amazing because you get closer to the actual recording. If you remove that sound character, or the other way around, if you have a sound character, That would mean you add that same sound carrier to a jazz recording, to a live recording, to a acoustic recording, to an electronic recording, and to a movie production, which is kind of, hey, is that really what the sound engineer or the recording mixing engineer in the studio had in mind? Because they spent ages on getting the sound right, and that's on the recording already, and we want to reproduce that.
Got it. Well, I've got an interesting question for you that this is mostly about RoomPerfect. So a lot of the complaints that I get, and there's some are grounded and some are not. So one of the complaints is that whenever people run room correction, it sucks out all the bass in their space. And it's a huge complaint they get. In some cases, it's people not being used to hearing a flatter, somewhat bass. Well, when I say flat, it can still be tuned higher, but they're not used to hearing even bass. They're used to hearing super boomy sections. But then they run room correction and they just end up, some of them love it, some of them don't like it without adjustment. So anyway, have you guys encountered that, and how would you get around it?
Yes, so a lot of that has to do with that many calibrations follow this very linear frequency response as the ideal, as the perfect goal. And if you have a linear sound, that is not really how we as listeners, as human beings, perceive good sound. It looks good to the eye to have this, flat linear frequency response, but sound-wise, that's not really what we are after. So we also take psychoacoustics into account and how this corridor that RoomPerfect has, what the target curve is. So, for example, I think everyone who's on this session here and listens, and you and I, everyone was probably been in a room at one point where you sit and say, "Wow, this sounds amazing. This is wonderful sound, wonderful speaker, wonderful room." I can show you, if you would have measured that fantastic room, the outcome would not be a perfect flat line. It would have some, let's say, character in the sound, and that is usually something that you should not, linearize. You have to remember that speakers are made for rooms. They don't sound good on, in the garden or in the parking lot. They need a room. So we have to preserve what is actually good in the room, how the speaker interacts, especially in the bass, in a good way with the room, and not linearize, flatten, remove all the bass. And that's unfortunately what especially some simpler room corrections do. They flatten the sound because they see everything. If you go back to this graph that you just showed, that is a very real acoustic response of two speakers in the room. So the blue is one speaker, and the red is the other speaker. And what a simple calibration would do is, like, everything that is above or below imagined flat line is a problem, and everything will be evened out, because that seems logical and that looks good to the eye. But actually, you have to be very careful that not everything that you see is really how you hear it. And some things have to be kept. And that is, for example, you need some sound energy in the low frequencies in order to have a good, enjoyable sound. Don't, even out everything.
Awesome. Well, Roland, we're coming up here in the end. I really appreciate you coming in, dropping the knowledge on us. I think you did an excellent job explaining. So thank you guys so much. And thank you for the Lyngdorf team. So
thanks for all the questions. I'm sure there were more, but I hope we covered some.
I know, it's hard to address all of them, but we'll try. We'll have to get you guys on another one. But awesome. Well, we've got a few winners here, and I've got a correction from the beginning. And I think either me or Roland misspoke. My team's yelling at me on the back end. The best question prize is the Lyngdorf MH3 in high gloss black. So I think we may have misspoke there at the beginning. So just correcting that. So as long as you guys are cool with it,
that's the one.
Here's the one. Yeah. I'm sorry, everybody, but no. So whoever wins this is still a very lucky prize winner. This is for the best question, and so we have selected the best question from Hanging with Hobbsy. So, and there was, can you explain the true digital amplifier in more detail? I want to understand the analog conversion. You guys get it. So hanging with Hobbsy, reach out to us and we'll get you set up with those speakers. And then on to the big giveaway winner. Sorry, give me 1 second. So this is for the TDAI 1120, and that's for Tom Cherry in Huntingdon, Pennsylvania. So reach out to us. We'll get you set up with those. And if you didn't win something, I want to share something we're doing that I'm super excited about. Somebody told me one time I say I'm excited too much, but we keep releasing exciting things. So this is a super cool opportunity. So we have actually partnered with Cheap Audio Man Randy to give back. And this is a foundation that supports mothers that with breast cancer that help support their family. So we're doing a huge raffle. We've got about $55,000 worth of gear right now. And so this is going to be announced at the next live stream giveaway where we're going to be giving away a ton of different prizes. So click the link, go check it out. Like I said, it's a paid raffle that goes 100% to the charity. So you guys definitely go and look at it. So awesome. Again, Roland, thank you so much. And thank you so much for everybody for joining in. Have a good evening.
Thanks for having me. Bye. See you next